night unfurled its dark, oppressive wings as I, Riley Parker, a 20-year-old sophomore at UT Austin, guided my weathered sedan onto FM 969, a desolate ribbon of asphalt east of Austin that felt less like a road and more like the frayed edge of the known world. The clock on my dashboard glowed 10:25 p.m. as I approached. The date, June 24, 2024, etched into my mind as the beginning of a summer I'd never forget. The desert scrub stretched endlessly in every direction, a jagged tapestry of shadows and twisted mesquite under a starlit sky, broken only by the brooding silhouette of an abandoned quarry. Its jagged edges rose like the fossilized spine of some ancient beast, a silent sentinel against the vast Texas night, its presence a weight that pressed against my chest. I'd taken this night shift job at the lonely subway outpost to fund my computer science degree. The promise of decent pay a lure strong enough to draw me into this forgotten corner of the state. The shop stood alone, a solitary beacon with its neon sign flickering faintly, a fragile defiance against the encroaching darkness, its glass windows reflecting the quarry's looming form like a distorted mirror. Stepping out into the night at exactly 10:30 p.m., the air hit me with a dry, earthy scent, laced with the faint metallic tang of the quarry's forgotten depths, a whisper of something primordial that seemed to rise from the ground itself. The temperature hovered in the low 80s, but a chill unrelated to the weather slithered down my spine as I approached the glass doors. Inside, Greg, the day manager who'd hired me, waited with a demeanor that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. His eyes, shadowed with fatigue, darted nervously around the fluorescent-lit interior, scanning the darkened windows where the quarry's silhouette pulsed faintly, as if alive. His fingers trembled as he handed me a faded name tag bearing my name, Riley, in worn black letters, the plastic edges chipped and yellowed from years of handling. "Night shift's different," he muttered, his voice low and strained, his gaze flickering toward the void beyond the glass. "Night quirks, you know. Just follow the rules. Miss Tala will explain everything. Good luck, kid." The way he lingered on night quirks twisted my stomach into a tight, uncomfortable knot, a premonition I couldn't dismiss, but I clipped the tag to my black polo and forced a nod. This gig paid well. $12 an hour, a steal for a sandwich shop in the middle of nowhere, and the hours fit my class schedule. After debugging code and unraveling algorithms all semester, how hard could slapping meat and cheese together be? It promised a mindless break, a respite from the cerebral grind, or so I told myself. The evening crew moved with the practiced efficiency of people desperate to escape before the real night took hold, their chatter a low hum of exhaustion as they wrapped up their shift. By 10:45 p.m., the last of them had filtered out through the back door, leaving me alone with my new coworkers in a silence that felt too heavy. Zara bounded over first, her energy a whirlwind that defied the late hour. Black hair streaked with vibrant purple highlights framing a face split by a grin so wide it seemed to challenge the room's sterile brightness. Her name tag, adorned with tiny skull stickers, marked her as the resident eccentric. "Fresh meat," she announced with unrestrained delight, clapping her hands together with a sound that echoed off the linoleum. "I'm Zara, ghost expert and sandwich artist extraordinaire. You're going to love it here. Riley, hands down the weirdest job you'll ever have." Before I could unpack her cryptic enthusiasm, Theo emerged from the back room, a shadow given human form. Tall and thin, his sharp angles were accentuated by dark circles under his eyes that suggested weeks, perhaps months, without rest. His movements were deliberate yet weary, each step a reluctant expenditure of energy he could ill afford. "Don't scare him off on night one, Z," he said, his voice laced with a fond sarcasm that softened the edges of his exhaustion. "Kid needs at least a week before he runs screaming like the last guy." "I don't scare easy," I countered, my voice steadier than I felt, earning genuine laughs that reverberated oddly in the sterile space, a momentary comfort against the unease creeping up my spine. "We'll see about that," came a new voice, rich with an authority that seemed to ripple through the air. I turned to see Ms. Tala emerging from the small office tucked behind the counter, and her presence struck me like a thunderclap. Perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun that gleamed under the fluorescence. Her dark, serene eyes pierced through me to some hidden core, as if she could see the questions I hadn't yet formed. There was something undeniably ancient about her, a weight that suggested she'd walked this land before the subway's foundations were poured and would remain long after it crumbled back into the desert dust. "Riley," she said, extending a weathered hand that was surprisingly warm, a jolt like static electricity, warmer, more alive, coursing through me as our palms met. She studied my face for a long moment, her expression unreadable, then nodded as if I'd passed an unseen test. "The land speaks at night here. Listen carefully and you'll be just fine." Her voice dropped to a murmur as she reached into her pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper that crackled faintly as she handed it to me. "Follow these rules. Memorize them. Follow them exactly, without exception, without question." I unfolded the paper with trembling fingers, expecting the usual employee handbook drivel: hairnets, hand washing, safety protocols, but instead found 6 handwritten rules scrawled in a precise, looping script that made my skin crawl and my mouth go dry. Never make eye contact with drive-through customers after 1:11 a.m. Seal the front door with salt at 2:22 a.m. No exceptions. If a customer hums, mimic their tune exactly. If shadows move on the prep counter, scatter flour to still them. Ignore tapping from the basement hatch. If someone asks for the old path, say "closed for repairs" and turn away. "What the hell is this?" I asked, looking up to meet her calm, unflinching gaze. "Rules," she replied, as if the word carried the weight of scripture. "Follow them, and the night passes peacefully. Break them." She shrugged with the casual indifference of someone discussing a passing storm. "The land remembers every slight." Zara bounced beside me, her energy a palpable vibration, her eyes alight with excitement. "Don't worry, it's not as scary as it sounds." "Well, okay, it's exactly that scary, but you get used to it after a while." "Used to what?" I demanded, my voice edged with skepticism. But Theo clapped my shoulder with a gentleness that belied his weary frame. "Welcome to the weird side of Austin, man. Roll with it. Fighting it only makes things worse." His words hung in the air, a cryptic invitation to a world I wasn't sure I was ready to enter, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a chorus of restless spirits. The first few hours passed with a deceptive normalcy that felt more unsettling than outright strangeness, a calm before an unseen storm. I immersed myself in the sandwich assembly line, my hands finding a rhythm as I memorized the layout of meats: turkey, ham, salami, cheeses, and vegetables, the cold steel of the prep counter grounding me in the mundane. The task was a welcome contrast to the mental acrobatics of my programming classes at UT, where I'd spent the semester debugging code and unraveling complex algorithms, a cerebral grind that left my mind sharp but my body restless. Here, the simplicity of layering provolone on wheat bread felt like a meditation, a respite I hadn't known I needed. At 11 p.m., a tired trucker rumbled up to the drive-thru, his enormous rig idling with a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the shop's thin walls. "Turkey sub," he rasped through the speaker, his voice gravelly with exhaustion. "Extra mayo, no tomatoes, throw some jalapenos on there if you got M." I assembled the sandwich with care, toasting it to a golden perfection that crackled faintly, the scent of warm bread mingling with the sharp bite of jalapenos. I handed it out with a bag of chips and a large coffee, his crumpled bills a tangible reward for my efforts. "See," Zara said, appearing beside me to wipe down the counter with a cloth that moved with practiced ease. "Normal people doing normal things, that's like 60% of the night. And the other 40%? I asked, though a part of me recoiled from the answer, sensing the weight of their shared glances. She and Theo exchanged a look heavy with unspoken history, a silent dialogue of experiences I hadn't yet earned. "You'll see," Theo said simply, his voice a low rumble that carried the promise of secrets. I spent the next hour restocking napkin dispensers, their metallic clatter a comforting anchor, and wiping down tables, the linoleum gleaming under my efforts. The routine was oddly soothing, a tether to the ordinary world I'd known before this shift. But as midnight approached, the atmosphere shifted, a subtle thickening of the air that pressed against my skin like a warning. The fluorescent lights dimmed imperceptibly, casting longer shadows across the linoleum, their edges sharper than they should have been. The refrigerator's hum grew louder, a low drone that seemed to pulse with an almost musical cadence, filling the silence with a sound that felt alive. The shop's usual scent, bread, processed meat, the faint tang of vinegar from the pickles, morphed into an earthy undertone, redolent of desert wind carrying the dust of ancient stones, a fragrance that stirred something primal in my memory. Ms. Tala emerged from the office, her presence a steadying force, her eyes scanning the empty parking lot with the patience of a sentinel awaiting a signal. "Quiet tonight," she murmured to herself, though I caught the words, her tone laced with an expectation that set my nerves on edge. At 1:15 a.m., headlights swept across the windows, slicing through the darkness as a car pulled into the drive-thru. I moved toward the window, my instincts kicking in, but Ms. Tala's gentle yet firm grip on my arm halted me mid-step. "Remember Rule 1 and Rule 3, she whispered, her voice a soft command that carried the weight of experience. My heart began to pound, a rapid tattoo against my ribs, as I approached the window with cautious steps. The customer was a vague silhouette in the shadows of the car, a shape without definition, and no order came, no request for a menu. Instead, a low, haunting hum emanated from the speaker, a melody that echoed strangely within the confined space of the shop, reverberating off the walls like a call from another realm. Rule 3 demanded I mimic it exactly. I started humming, my voice tentative at first, the tune shifting like smoke, a challenge to my focus as I struggled to match its elusive notes. I kept my gaze carefully averted per Rule 1, avoiding eye contact after 1:11 a.m., a rule that now felt less arbitrary and more vital. A quick glance upward, my eyes fixed on the car's roof rather than the driver, revealed a face that blurred and flowed like water under moonlight, its features indistinct yet unervingly present. The humming stopped abruptly, and a voice like autumn wind rustling through dry leaves sighed, "Thank you, that was correct." The car pulled away with a silence that defied its engine, vanishing into the night, leaving me standing at the window with my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. "Good job," Ms. Tala said behind me, her voice warm with approval. "First test passed." "Test? What was that thing?" I demanded, turning to face her, my voice unsteady. "A customer," she replied with the same calm simplicity she'd used all night. "One of many who visit us in the dark hours." Zara appeared beside me, her grin both reassuring and unhinged, her eyes gleaming with a thrill I couldn't yet share. "Pretty cool, right? I've been here a year and still get goosebumps during the humming ones." At 1:30 a.m., as I wiped down the prep counter, a sound froze me mid-motion, a rhythmic tapping that rose from the basement hatch near the walk-in cooler. The hatch, marked with a faded basement access sign that looked untouched since the building's construction in the 80s, emitted a hollow, echoing knock, like someone rapping on wood from a great distance. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to investigate, to pry open the hatch and peer into the darkness below, my curiosity. A trait that had made me excel at debugging code and solving complex problems, itching to unravel the mystery. But Rule 5 was clear: ignore tapping from the basement hatch. I forced myself to continue wiping, my hands trembling slightly, the tapping persisting for 10 minutes before gradually fading into the refrigerator's hum, leaving an echo that lingered like a phantom breath. "Smart boy," Ms. Tala said approvingly from her position by the register, her voice carrying a note of pride. "Curiosity is valuable, but discipline keeps you breathing." At 2:22 a.m., she appeared beside me with a small container of coarse salt, its crystals glinting under the lights, distinct from the table salt we used for customers. "Time for Rule 2, she said simply, handing it to me. I walked to the front door, feeling slightly ridiculous but recalling her warning about following the rules exactly, and poured a thin line across the threshold. The salt sparkled like tiny stars against the dark linoleum, and the moment I finished, I heard something outside. Not quite footsteps, but a presence moving past, a whisper of movement that raised the hairs on my neck. The salt line glowed faintly for a fleeting second, too brief to be certain I'd seen it, and Miss Tala nodded. The barrier holds. The presence retreated, but the night's tension remained, a watchfulness that pressed against the windows. By 3 a.m., as I restocked condiment containers, shadows on the prep counter began to writhe, their movements independent of the overhead lights, coalescing into shapes that suggested reaching hands and grasping fingers. Rule 4 demanded action. If shadows move on the prep counter, scatter flour to still them. I grabbed a bag of flour from the baking supplies, my hands shaking as I scattered it across the stainless steel. The moment the white powder touched the writhing shadows, they froze, revealing a spectral outline. A human figure pressed against the counter, as if trying to push through from another plane. "Excellent," Miss Tala said, her voice carrying genuine approval. "You're learning quickly. The spirits respect decisive action." The flower faded over minutes, taking the shadow with it, leaving only the normal play of light and shade. As the first hints of dawn filtered through the windows, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, Miss Tala approached. "You did well tonight, Riley," she said, her voice warm with genuine warmth. "The land accepts you." Walking to my car, I found myself whistling that haunting melody from the drive-thru, the tune coming naturally, an exhilaration bubbling within me despite the night's strangeness. I was already anticipating the next shift, the unknown pulling me back like a siren's call. Thursday arrived with an ominous weight that settled over me like a shroud, the events of my first night replaying in my mind as I drove to the subway. All day, my thoughts had churned, driving me to the UT library where I buried myself in digital archives, my curiosity a relentless force. Searches for FM 969 Austin History, Unexplained Phenomena Texas, and Central Texas Supernatural Occurrences yielded mostly dross. Real estate listings, road construction updates, urban legend forums from ghost hunting enthusiasts, but a 1987 graduate thesis by Drive Maria Santos, Indigenous Land Rights and Spiritual Practices in Central Texas, stopped me cold. Her research detailed a 19th century Comanche pact binding displaced spirits to the quarry, a liminal space where the living and dead communicated, its rituals demanding respect. Newspaper archives corroborated this. A 1954 article on a gas station plagued by unexplained sounds. A 1978 piece on Martha's Desert Rose Diner shuttered after staff fled restless spirits. And a 1999 report quoting workers describing invisible customers. The land spoke and we were its keepers. That night, the atmosphere thickened as I arrived at 10:25 p.m. The shadowless figure tested the salt barrier at 2:22 a.m. Its whispers. "Let us in, the path is blocked." Met by the glowing line, while flowers stilled writhing shadows on the counter. A new rule emerged. Clap 3 times if the lights hum. At 3:15 a.m., the hum vibrated through my bones, and my claps froze a creeping shadow, earning Ms. Tala's nod. But Theo's agitation peaked. "I'm done," he shouted, slamming his palm against the drive-thru window. A flash of cold fire left a black burn spreading up his wrist, a mark of the land's wrath. "The window remembers," Ms. Tala said quietly, her voice a lament. Friday introduced Kai, an 18-year-old freshman with sandy hair and eager eyes, but his failed humming test at 3 a.m. rattled him, the customer's agitation chilling the air. Saturday's proving descended me into a desert under an alien sky via the basement hatch, where Leia offered an amulet for guardianship or a feather for entrapment. Stepping on green tile, I refused both, invoking Rule 5, and climbed back to Ms. Tala's approval. Sunday, my 6th night, transformed the shop into a ritual space with candles and an altar. Theo was gone, marked by the land. I negotiated Rule 7, choosing a token to guide others away, breaking the Pact's cycle. As I drove off, the token warm in my pocket, I felt the game expand, my role as a guardian set. Months later, with my degree secured, I steer others from cursed paths, the token a silent guide. Have you ever felt a pull to the unknown? Would you face it to protect others? The land still speaks, but now I answer, its voice a thread in my new reality.